It looks like the launch of AMD's 7900 XT and XTX may be facing some serious problems, and yes, we may get a lot higher pricing. Look at this, for example, in China, and now this is speculation at this point. The GPUs aren't out or really even on retail, but it says almost up to $1,600 for an XTX. What I'm holding in my hand here is the previous generation 6900 XT, and this is what a reference model looks like, so you guys know when I talk about it. This is made by AMD. I think they look very attractive, but a key point, this is the model that comes at the cheapest MSRP. This was $999. AIB models, for example, AMD has like Asus and Power Color, they're going to cost considerably more, as they did for the 6900 XT, typically a few $100s more, but there's a caveat. If the situation in the market is bad enough, these will stay the same price as MSRP when you're buying from a retailer like Micro Center or even AMD themselves. But the AIB models, they have literally no limit to what they can charge. We saw 6900 XTs like the Power Color for as high as like $2,500 during the GPU shortage last year. So that shows you that the sky's the limit. If the demand is there for these GPUs and this isn't available for everybody to get from AMD, we're going to be paying higher prices once again for the 7900 XT and especially the XTX, which has the best performance as far as we know thus far. So while no, I don't think generally they're going to be $1,600, the AIB models I think would likely fall closer to maybe $1,200, the same price as an RTX 4080 if I were to venture a guess. And now let's hear a word from our sponsor, VIP-CDKdeals.com, a Windows 10 Pro CD key. Add to cart, you put in code CC20. This will also work on Windows 11. You want to go into your settings in Windows, change and adjust your CD key, click activate, and now let's go back to the video. Obviously, while the reference model is going to be $999, we've seen already, look at this article here. It's saying that in China, no reference models will be available, and typically we see a lot less reference models like with the 6900 XT compared to something like the AIB models, which generally will be a lot more abundant in the market. So that means that especially in that particular market, they're going to see a lot more expensive AIB models. If it's $999, you know, if the demand is high, AIBs are going to charge at least the price of a 4080 for it. And at this point, the reason why a lot of people do want to buy AMD is going to be because of that value proposition for the performance that you're getting. Even though it's hard to justify value to performance when we're talking about $1,000 GPUs, that's sadly what it's come to with prices getting higher and higher. You can't just grab a 1080 Ti and that's the highest end for $700. It was pretty recently that a 3080 was $699, at least the MSRP price. Now it's up to $1,200 for the 4080. So we've seen some leaked benchmarks already that shows the 7900 XTX potentially beating the 4080 in certain synthetic benchmarks, but we're going to have to see exactly what happens with gaming. I don't really doubt that perhaps the XTX will beat the 4080 in certain applications and certain games. It may even get pretty close to a 4090 in some instances, but it seems like Nvidia really overshot it with the RTX 4090, and that performance crown really isn't going anywhere. I think it's going to be a lot bigger of a difference than it even ever was, like with the 3090 versus the 6900 XT. We saw a lot closer performance numbers. In fact, this beat the 3090 in some games, and if you're not turning on ray tracing and you're playing at like 1440p, generally you're going to get really close, or in fact better than an RTX 3090. That's not really the case anymore with the 4090. There is a significant difference between the 4090 and even the second 4080, which I don't think AMD will really reach, aside from maybe very specific scenarios. But even then, I think the 4090 definitely in a class of its own. So that really is going to limit a little bit how high the pricing on the 7900 XTX will go. It's been my fear, and I've told you guys, as much as everybody's looking forward to AMD, because I know a lot of people complain about NVIDIA's pricing practices and all the shenanigans with the 4080 12GB, you have to remember something else. I think AMD, if given the chance, will probably do the same thing to you as NVIDIA will if they have enough, market power to do so. The only reason they don't, they have to be competitive, or else NVIDIA will just eat their lunch in every single tier. That means that if the 7900 XTX does prove to be prohibitively expensive, people are just not going to buy it. They're looking forward to it, not because it has some baked in technology that NVIDIA doesn't have. In fact, I even covered this in yesterday's video. If you compare hardware for hardware, typically the NVIDIA GPUs are going to be more powerful across the board as a general GPU for not only gaming but like content creation. Then of course you put in ray tracing, NVIDIA will be the better GPU objectively. It's not even a preference thing. So the reason why AMD has to be highly competitive is because of their pricing. If the pricing skews way too high, that's going to be a big issue for them, because remember, even though some GPUs are still selling okay, like the 4090 because it's a 4090, some GPUs have done terribly during the last month of its launch, and specifically, I mean the RTX 4080. Nobody's really buying it. In fact, anytime it has a drop or it comes in stock, it's staying for typically considerably longer than any other GPU, and eventually it does sell out because there aren't as many options on the market. The 4090 has been perpetually sold out, so the 4080, as unpopular as it is, still happens to sell here and there. But when the AMD GPUs come out, it's going to have to compete not only with like the past generation GPUs. This is still a tremendous value. You could probably pick one of these up for like $600 or something like that, and it's still a 6900 XT. If you're playing at 1440p, getting a 4090 or a 7900 XT might be a little bit overkill. If you want to have a pretty reasonable gaming experience, something like this for the price is going to be a whole lot better than most GPUs. Imagine a 1440p rig. Throw this in your system and compare it to even like a 4080. You may not really notice a huge difference if you turn the frames per second counter off. Of course, if you're looking at that number, the 4080 certainly is considerably faster, but for the most part, as long as you're getting like a respectable number, and this will do it for you in many games, especially at 1440p, you're never going to notice that difference. And then if you get into ray tracing and things like that, that's where things will fall apart, but then you have to pay a considerable amount more for something like the 4080 than you would for something like this. Even brand new, these are much cheaper now. So at the end of the day, the 7900 XTX has to keep its pricing under control, or else AMD is going to be in big trouble because nobody's going to buy it if it's too expensive. There are some signs that it may be more expensive than we're expecting. I don't know how many of these $999 XTX models we're actually going to see, because typically these AMD reference models are always going to be more limited than the AIB models. And as we saw with the RX 6000, AIBs were not shy about really upping that price. They have less to sell, less market share, so they figure the couple that they do, they rather make the most amount of money on, and we saw that happen many times. And hopefully this isn't going to repeat itself, because even though this was a great GPU, a lot of people didn't buy it because of availability issues. The price was way higher than people wanted to pay, and overall, when people do overpay, they rather it be for an NVIDIA GPU. That's just the nature that we've had. NVIDIA is the biggest player in the market with like 80% market share. That's just the reality of it until AMD really gets more market share. They certainly have a great opportunity here to gain more market share, as people are kind of mad at the 4080 and the 4090 sold out. They can really attack the market in a positive way and have a lot of these available. Not only that, have it at a fair price where the AIBs keep it under control and make sure that the drivers and software experience are also all kept in check. If they can do that, they can start to really nibble away at NVIDIA's market share dominance a lot more aggressively than if they just release a couple of GPUs and then don't really have anything for months and months, like what happened with the RX 6000. So it's going to be very interesting to see this launch. As we get closer and closer, we're going to start to get more of these leaks, more of these tidbits, but hopefully the situation does get better and the launch is successful and the prices stay low, because at this point I don't think people want to pay high prices for these GPUs any longer. All right, guys, so remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.